Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership, What's on Your Mind? Remember, we're a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey, and we're going to add value by speaking to amazing people with amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel and you follow us on your podcast provider. So today we are speaking to Steve. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on today. I've heard Steve speak several times over the last couple of years, primarily through my role in the Institute of Directors, across the water in Liverpool and the Liverpool region, which you'll hear a lot more about. There's a specific link there. And I can't wait to try and cram all this into 20 minutes. So let's go. So as I hit the 20-minute timer, Steve, if you could introduce yourself for the people who don't know who you are and what you do. Yeah,
my name is Steve Rotheram. I'm the Metro Mayor of the Liverpool City region, and that is an area that's 1.6 million people: Halton, Knowsley, Liverpool, St Helens, Sefton and the Wirral. And I'm one of 8 kids, brought up in a matriarchal family and working class, ordinary sort of type of background. Left school with few formal qualifications, went into the construction sector as an apprentice bricklayer, and then somehow found my way into my current job, which is the Metro Mayor. But also I'm married and have been for 33 years to Sandra and 3 wonderful kids.
Fantastic. But there's a lot in there, that background, that I'm already going to ask you about. So well, hashtag leadership, what's on your mind? What comes to your mind when you just hear the word leadership?
Well, I think automatically I think of great leaders. I think of people about leadership, because that's the greatest examples that we have of the types of leadership that you've got, whether it's through times of strife or war, or whether it's trying to make the world a better place. So I think about some of the great people that we've seen, historically, and the likes of course, everybody will say Nelson Mandela, or people like that. But I'm a Liverpool fan, and I also think of leadership as, something that you can display, something on the pitch, that never say die attitude. And I look at leaders in many different guises and forms.
Yeah, I like that. I've got a personal drive for that transactional thing between sport, business, high performance, and bring those different stories that you can transfer the learning from. So I love that you reference both of those. Staying with you personally, we really like to dig into where your journey started. So whether it's now on reflection, I'm asking you about it, you're thinking, well, where did my leadership journey start? Or was there a light bulb moment at the time where you were aware that this is where it's starting? How far back can we go?
I suppose for me, my mum and dad split up, and I was told that I was de facto, if you like, the male head of the household at 17, and I was going out, and as I say, I was an apprentice bricklayer, so I was working on building sites, and I was expected to bring money home and put it on the table and keep the family going. So that was very old school. That sounds like it's pre-war. It's not. I mean, I'm talking about, this was the late 70s, early 80s, around my youth and sort of formative years, I suppose. And everybody else was doing the exact same. So I suppose I took a more independent role then, and that's the sort of journey that I've always been on. I remember when there was some problems in a place that I work called Pilkington's UK5 site, and we were building this brand new factory for one of the world's greatest glass manufacturers. And some of our colleagues who were the electricians went on strike, and we went out in sympathy with them. And I was told as a 17, 18-year-old that apprentices couldn't vote in the strike, and we had management watching, and they said they'd be watching us, and I purposely put my hand up to show my solidarity with fellow workers. And I suppose that's my first instance, if you like, where that independent streak really came to the fore.
Yeah, and again, just you explaining that from back then, I'm already looking forward to what you're doing now, and that's exactly the same, isn't it? Do you think, has that stayed a common thread throughout your journey in what you've stood for, what you're passionate about doing, and how you're leading people and your own self for that purpose, if that makes sense?
Well, my passion is social justice. I mean, I've got lots and lots of other things that I love, you know, sport and politics and people. But yeah, the thing that has driven that leadership, if you like, is that desire, the inherent desire that I have, and you can't fake that, which is I want to try to make things better for people, and always have done. You know, I remember going back to school. There was a thing called, I was in a school called Roughwood, so there was a thing called crime, as they try to do with these acronyms, Kirkby Roughwood Youth Movement. Basically, the idea was to go and help people who were less fortunate. In this case, it was pensioners in our area, and to do things that they couldn't do, you know, a bit of gardening or whatever it might be. And I was involved in that. So that drive to try to help people who, for whatever circumstances they find themselves in, aren't able to help themselves, is something that today is still this exact same passion and the thing that gets me out of bed every single day.
I like that. I like that. So with your journey in leadership and people focused, and how you've been in lots of different positions to have leadership roles of different amounts of people in different sectors, etc. We ask people to look at, like, has there been a couple of impact moments along the way that have molded you to who you are today, specifically on your leadership journey? And we stay sort of positive and negative here. You don't need to reference any names, but what has been some of the things that have really molded how you now approach leadership? What sort of things would you pick out?
Yeah, I've met some wonderful characters along the way, and certainly on building sites, they were they shaped a lot of the type of person that you become, because you have to learn to be resilient and stand up for yourself. So leadership in a slightly different way, which was more defensive rather than, you know, strategic or looking towards a big vision. But I do remember some of those things. I went to work in the Falklands just after the cessation of hostilities in 1983, and I just thought the way that we were treated, because we were away from home, there was nothing we could do. I mean, literally, they held us hostage, really. You know, they were our captors, and they told us what to do, when to get up, and how many days you worked, and all of those sorts of things. And I remember thinking, I'm never going to allow myself to be dominated like that ever again. And when I came back home in 83, the end of 83, because we were away for 7-8 months, and you know, hardly any contact with home at that time. There was no mobile phones. I mean, in fact, you had to book a phone call 2 weeks in advance. So you had to work in the time difference and tell somebody you were going to phone them at a certain time, and for that person hopefully to be at the other end of that public telephone when you phone them. So that's how archaic it really was. But when I came back, I just decided that I wouldn't work for anybody, so I set up my own business. And again, I think that independent streak that I've got was displayed in the fact that I wanted to lead and not be led.
Yeah. What are some of the leadership lessons you've learned along the way that have really kind of made you stop and think about what you're doing, how you're doing it? And again, I know there's a lot of people focused in what you do as well, but there must be some lessons along the way that you've had those moments of learning, those light bulbs popping off.
I'll never do anything or ask people to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So, you know, right from sort of an early age, I've also had that as a core value, if you like. I don't believe in exploiting anybody. So the people that I've worked with, you could ask them, but I'll get stuck in and do anything, you know, whatever it is. And there's no airs and graces, and I don't think there should be. And as I say, I've worked with some fantastic leaders over the years, and those who did display a sort of the common touch, they're the ones I think that really connected with their workforces, and therefore got more out of the workforce. You know, they were more productive because people will do that extra little bit, go that extra yard for somebody who's not pushing stuff onto them that they wouldn't actually do themselves. So yeah, I've learned lots and lots of lessons, but probably that's for me one of the most important.
Yeah, so you referenced earlier on about, and again, like previously a long time ago when you started, some of the old school, let's say, leadership. In the last year or so, we've talked about, like, has leadership changed? And I think with the technology, it's changing at a fast pace, and some of the capabilities of people to lead people, some of the challenges are changing. From your experience, have you seen a shift in leadership? Have you seen a change? And if there has been, when in your journey have you seen that sort of come to light? Or are you just on mute, Steve?
Sorry, mate. I think leaders are far more under scrutiny now than they've ever been in their lives. You know, both within workforces, but also like the social media or the wider media. And you see things that happen that literally make you think twice about why somebody would do some of those roles. Look, I'm no friend of Liz Truss, for instance, and she made some absolutely catastrophic errors. But to be under the microscope 24/7, I just wouldn't fancy that type of a role. In fact, one of the questions that I got once on another podcast, which is on the BBC, was whether I would ever think of becoming the Prime Minister. And I said, not for a big clock, which is a very Scouse way of saying, you know, no chance. I'd never want to do that role. And I still stand by that. You know, these sorts of high profile and high pressure roles are bad enough. But when you've got everybody outside who's more expert than you are in the role that you're doing, because they can go on to a social media platform and just tell you how crap you are, I think that's really difficult. So leadership is not just about, you know, trying to direct a group of people in a certain direction. It's also communicating that to a much wider audience. And I think we've seen that since the advent of social media.
Yeah, and again, just from you showing that, there's big positives and big negatives, aren't there, with this visibility piece of being able to get, you referenced already some of the great leaders out there who are putting great content out there, showing up in a great way. But then there's also the microscope bit of you can't please everybody and all that. So it leads me to ask you about politics. Like, why? I know there's the social justice and that kind of making a difference in your local area to a lot bigger, not just showing up in the local area. Your leadership role now, what sort of things are you impacting, just to share the audience of what's on your plate right now in regards to leadership and what are you getting involved with? Can you give us a bit of a flavour of what's on your plate right now? Yeah,
there's a lot on. And by the way, just to go back to my previous comments, I'm not in any way inferring that I thought Liz Truss was a good leader. Quite the antithesis of good leadership, to tell you the truth. It's just the spotlight, you know, it's on leaders at the moment. Yeah. The sort of things that we're concentrating on. So this year, 2023, for me is the year of delivery. What I want from all of my teams, and there are a number, is to really concentrate on, we've won pots of money, but now people need to see the tangible difference that winning those pots of money will make to the city region. And public transport is probably the most visible of those things. We need to obviously address the climate emergency, and it's the most important thing, I think, for every one of us. It's the existential threat, isn't it, to the whole of humanity. So we need to do our bit about doing that. But whilst we're doing that, we can actually improve services to people. And that's where I want to concentrate lots of my fire this year, and to hopefully start seeing the tangible benefits of all of that hard work, not just by me. And we have put some hard work in, myself and Councillor Liam Robinson, who was my chair of the Transport Committee. At times, genuinely, we've been working really stupid hours, 18, 20-hour days to try and get things resolved. And all of that needs something, doesn't it, that people can see and point to. People like shiny things. So when they see all of this all running, this transport network, I think they'll start to understand the importance of the role, and therefore the importance of the leadership that has been shown to take the Liverpool City region in this direction.
Yeah, can you give us a little bit of an understanding of the people element of your team, like from your perspective? And I said this to you when we spoke last at the sustainability conference, that the people that are behind the scenes, if you like, and all the things that you're able to pop up and champion and be visible, and where's that lead regards to who is behind the scenes? Who are you leading? What's that look like?
There's obviously, I have a chief executive, and that chief executive, literally I trust and allow to get on with the job, which is to deliver on my manifesto. And so the organisation is geared up around that. It's a bit like government. If you think of government, the permanent civil service are the people who deliver on what the government's manifesto is. So we have, upwards of around 1,000 people within the combined authority, and their role is to ensure that we get this delivery manifesto, because the manifesto for me is the strategic direction of the Liverpool City region. It is trying to create this better ecosystem which we can attract more inward investment into, so more good businesses. We can try to retain more of the clever people, so stopping the brain drain from our great universities down to London and elsewhere, but also to give people a chance of a good job or a second chance if they've been let down. So the whole thing, the whole organisation is now geared up around what I put 2 and a bit years ago into my manifesto, and we're making really huge strides in the right direction.
What's been your experience with dealing with a multitude of different people? And that just came out to my sort of brain then. I can explain it a little bit. When I sometimes joke with somebody this week actually about leading people, and when they say don't work with animals or children, like I just put people in general, because there are challenges there, aren't there? You must come across so many different people, the diversity of what they want from a leader, what their leadership style is, even down to their learning styles and their communication styles. Are you aware of that? Because you deal with so many people, and how do you consciously do something about that to make sure that you're showing up as the best for them, also for you as well?
It's not as hard as you might think for somebody like me. I've been brought up in a big family. I've always had to communicate to people, even when I was self-employed, you have to try and win contracts. So I was building fireplaces, knocking on people's doors and trying to persuade them to give me their money to build what they wanted. I think for me, one of the most enjoyable aspects of the job is about that, animals and people and all that sort of stuff, and children. I love going to school. So that's not the hard bit. The thing about styles is really an interesting point, because there are people who've never ever met me who hate me, and I find that really weird. So they've never met me, but they've just, for whatever reason, because I'm not a polished performer in regard to, when you see some politicians, they're almost word perfect, aren't they? And I've never been one of them. I speak from the heart mostly, and sometimes that gets you in trouble, because if you are doing that, then that might not be the message that a party machine wants to convey.
Yeah.
But I've always found that to be the best way, and I can justify it afterwards, because if somebody then does want to debate me or argue about the point I've made, if it's from the heart, then I don't mind taking anybody on, because I've got these inherent values and principles that are unshakable. So as long as it's part of that, I think that you display good leadership in sticking to your values, where I think leadership is called into question all too often is when people are making it up on the spot, and then you have to try to justify that at a later date, and that for me is not real leadership. That's like pandering, isn't it, to whatever the zeitgeist is at that particular moment in time.
Yeah, I like that. And again, that awareness of other people and you doing that is really valuable. I've got 1 minute left. 1 minute left. Let's try and cram one more question in. Obviously, we talk about a leadership journey and it's never ending. What do you do? Do you do anything consciously now this year to learn, develop, other than just being in the role you are, because you're learning every day, like those people skills? Do you do anything, reading, podcasts? Well, how do you and how are you going to learn and develop and move forwards?
I've done an unconscious bias course, which I found invaluable. That was 6 weeks, and it taught me so much about me, but I learned such a lot from it about leadership and stuff. I'm part of Mike Bloomberg, who was the former mayor of New York. He has got this group that he puts money into, so it doesn't cost the public purse any money, but it's a leadership program. So I'm doing this, I'm doing a program with Harvard. You know, I said before, I'm a brickie from Kirkby, and I'm doing a Harvard degree, you know, really weird. But yeah, I think the day that you believe that you don't need any further education or advice or support or guidance on leadership is the day when you become Liz Truss and just pack it in and go.
What a great way to finish the podcast. I love that. But Steve, thank you so much. Invaluable for the audience, and I hope everybody enjoyed that. And as I always say, please, if you what were your takeaways from that, and which were the bits that resonated, which have you got stories around, and please let us know. Make sure every Wednesday this year and we have a new episode coming out with experts in their field and people with amazing stories to give you those light bulb moments and those stop moments to add value to your leadership journey. So Steve, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Jim.
And we'll see you all next week, ladies and gents. Take care. Bye.
Bye.